Picture this. It's 8:04 on a Tuesday morning. A woman in a gray coat slides her card across the counter, taps twice, and walks away with a 16-ounce oat milk latte. $4.50. She doesn't think twice about it, it's just coffee. But behind that counter, the owner isn't smiling because business is booming. She's smiling because it's the only thing keeping her employees from noticing she hasn't paid herself in 6 weeks. Here's the number that should stop you cold. That latte cost roughly 90 cents to make. Milk, beans, the cup, a splash of syrup, 90 cents in, $4.50 out. Paper, that's a markup north of 400%. Margins most industries would kill for. Car dealerships dream about margins like that. Grocery stores would riot. So here's the question nobody in line is asking. If coffee is this profitable, why do roughly 6 out of every 10 cafes shut their doors within 3 years? That gap between what the receipt says and what the bank account says is where this video lives. Because somewhere between 90 cents and $4.50, a small business either survives or quietly bleeds out. And most people who dream about opening a cafe never once do the math to find out which one they'd become. By the end of this breakdown, you'll know exactly where that money disappears. The rent, the labor, the waste, the hidden costs nobody posts on Instagram. And you'll have the same framework used by owners who actually make it. But first, let's talk about the dream everyone starts with, and the ledger that eventually meets it. Let's meet two people. Call the first one Dream Emma. Emma is 34, burned out from a decade in corporate marketing, and she has a vision board with exposed brick, hanging Edison bulbs, and a chalkboard menu in looping cursive. She's imagined this cafe 100 times. The hiss of the espresso machine. Regulars who know her name. Mornings that smell like cinnamon instead of stress. She signs a lease on a charming corner spot because it feels right. She spends on the aesthetic first. Reclaimed wood counters, a vintage roaster, hand-painted signage. Because the vision has to look like the vision. Now meet numbers Nate. Same dream, same burnout, same love of coffee. But before Nate signs anything, he opens a spreadsheet. He asks unglamorous questions. What's my rent per square foot? What's my labor cost per hour of operation? How many transactions do I need on a slow Tuesday just to keep the lights on? Nate's cafe might look less like a Pinterest board and more like a functioning machine, but that machine is designed to survive. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The market doesn't care how good your cafe feels. It only cares whether the math works. Emma's first year will be gorgeous and exhausting. 14-hour days, a growing sense of dread every time a supplier invoice lands, and a nagging fear she's never quite named out loud. Nate's first year will be less romantic, but he'll actually know, month to month, whether he's winning or losing. This video is going to build Nate's spreadsheet with you. Line by line, dollar by dollar. Because Follow Your Passion has never once paid a commercial lease. And that spreadsheet starts before the doors even open. With a startup budget, most first-time owners get catastrophically wrong. Ask a first-time cafe owner what it costs to open, and you'll usually get a number somewhere between $50,000 and $80,000. That's the espresso machine, some furniture, a fresh coat of paint, maybe a POS system. It sounds reasonable. It's also, in most cities, dangerously incomplete. Let's build the real number. Start with the lease. Commercial landlords typically want first month, last month, and a security deposit before you get keys. On a modest 2,200 square foot space at $35 a square foot annually, that's already $10,500 just to walk through the door before a single chair is bought. Then comes the build-out. Plumbing for a 3-compartment sink, electrical upgrades to handle a commercial espresso machine that can pull 30 to 50 amps on its own. Ventilation. If you're roasting on site or even just running heavy equipment, you may need HVAC modifications that alone run $15,000 to $30,000. This is the invisible layer. The stuff that never makes it onto a mood board, because nobody photographs ductwork. Now, equipment. A commercial espresso machine, $8,000 to $20,000. A grinder, a POS system, a point-of-sale card reader, a commercial fridge, an ice machine, furniture, smallwares, cups, lids, portafilters, scales. Realistically, $40,000 to $70, zero before you've brewed a single cup for a paying customer. And here's the line item that blindsides almost everyone. Permitting and compliance. Health department permits. Fire suppression systems above your equipment, ADA-compliant bathrooms, and, this is the one nobody sees coming, a grease trap, often mandated by the city, running anywhere from $3,000 to $18,000 depending on size and plumbing complexity. Add initial inventory, 3 to 4 weeks of payroll before you're generating steady revenue, insurance, licensing, and a marketing budget to actually get people through the door. And that modest $50,000 cafe has quietly become a $150,000 to $250,000 undertaking. This isn't a scare tactic. It's arithmetic. And it's exactly why so many owners run out of cash before their first anniversary. Not because the coffee was bad, but because the budget was fiction. So say you've cleared that hurdle. You've got the capital, the space is built, the espresso machine is humming. Now the real test begins, because that $4.50 latte still has to prove itself. Cup by cup, let's go back to that latte. $4.50 in the customer's hand, roughly 90 cents in raw ingredients. That's the number every cafe dream calculation starts with, and it's the number that lies to you if you stop there. Break down that 90 cents. About 18 to 20 grams of coffee, maybe 30 cents worth. 8 ounces of milk, another 20 to 30 cents depending on whether it's dairy or oat. Oat milk alone can add 50 cents or more per drink. A cup, lid, and sleeve, roughly 15 to 20 cents. Syrup or flavoring, another dime or two if it's on the menu. Total cost of goods, somewhere between 80 cents and $1.20. That's your food cost. And on paper, it looks incredible. A gross margin north of 75%. Here's where most first-time owners stop the math. And here's exactly where the real story starts. That gross margin doesn't account for labor. Someone has to steam the milk, pull the shot, ring up the sale, and clean the machine, and that barista is being paid whether they make one drink an hour or 30. Spread a $17 an hour wage across a slow mid-morning stretch where you're only selling 12 drinks an hour, and suddenly labor alone can eat $1.40 of that latte's price. Then there's rent. If your lease is $4,500 a month and you're open 300 hours a month, that's $15 an hour in rent alone, money you owe whether a single customer walks in or not. Divide that across your average hourly drink volume, and rent might claim another 40 to 60 cents per cup. Add utilities. A commercial espresso machine and refrigeration run constantly, not just during business hours. Add card processing fees, typically 2.5 to 3% of every transaction. Add spoilage, milk that expires, pastries that don't sell, beans that go stale. Add breakage, waste, comped drinks for mistakes, and regulars. Stacker it all up, and that latte's true contribution margin, what's actually left to cover your fixed costs and eventually pay you, often shrinks from a dazzling $3. 60 gross profit down to somewhere between 1 cents and 180 net of variable costs. Still positive, still workable, but nowhere near the 400% fantasy that gets thrown around in Cafe Dream YouTube comments. This is the gap Dream Emma never sees coming. The space between the markup is incredible and the margin is survivable. Gross margin tells you what a product could theoretically earn. Contribution margin tells you what it actually earns, once real life is factored in. And this is where the math gets genuinely interesting. Because a margin of $1.50 a cup means nothing in isolation. The real question, the one that determines whether this business lives or dies, is this. How many of those cups do you actually need to sell every single day just to break even? Here's where the fantasy meets the calculator, and where most cafe dreams quietly die. Let's use realistic numbers for a modest single-location cafe. Fixed costs, the bills that show up whether you sell one drink or 1,000, typically run around $15,000 a month once you add it all up. Rent near $4,500. Payroll for a small core team around $7,000 to $8,000. Insurance, loan payments on that equipment financing, utilities, software subscriptions, and basic maintenance. We established last section that the average contribution margin per drink, after ingredients, labor allocation, and waste, lands somewhere around $1.50. So here's the equation. $15,000 in monthly fixed costs divided by 150 set contribution margin per drink equals exactly 10,000 drinks a month just to break even. Divide that across roughly 30 days, and you need about 333 drinks a day, every single day, before you've earned a single dollar of actual profit. Read that number again. 333 transactions. Not customer transactions, since many will buy a pastry too, which helps, but let's stay conservative on drinks alone. If you're open 10 hours a day, that's 33 drinks an hour, sustained for the entire time you're open, not just during a lunch rush, but during the dead 2 p.m. lull too. Now ask the honest question. Does a brand new cafe, unknown, with zero brand recognition, in a market full of established competitors, realistically pull 33 drinks an hour all day long in its first 6 months? For most new locations, the honest answer is no. Foot traffic builds slowly. Regulars take months to form, which means most cafes spend their first year, sometimes their first 18 months, operating below break-even, burning through the startup capital we calculated earlier just to stay open long enough for demand to catch up. This is the single calculation almost nobody runs before signing a lease. They calculate the dream. They rarely calculate the daily transaction count required to fund it. And this is exactly why the story doesn't end at break-even. Because even a cafe that hits its number in July can find itself underwater by February. And the reasons why have almost nothing to do with the quality of the coffee. Let's talk about the cafe that looked, on paper, like a success story. Picture a shop that opens in spring. By July, it's hitting 300 plus drinks a day, comfortably above break even, and the owner finally exhales. Instagram is full of sunny patio shots and iced lat specials. Then January hits. Foot traffic drops by a third. The same fixed costs are still due, rent doesn't take a seasonal discount, but revenue has fallen off a cliff. By February, that successful cafe is bleeding cash, and the owner is confused because nothing about the coffee changed. What changed was everything the spreadsheet didn't warn her about. This is where three silent killers usually show up. The first is labor cost creep. Scheduling a cafe is brutally hard. You need enough staff for the 8 a.m. rush, but if you schedule that same staffing level through the dead 2 p.m. stretch, you're paying wages for hours nobody's buying coffee. Most new owners overschedule out of fear of long lines, and that fear quietly eats the margin we calculated earlier. The second is waste. Milk expires. Pastries baked fresh each morning that don't sell by evening become a loss, not a leftover. Beans go stale if they sit too long. Industry estimates put food and beverage waste in cafes anywhere from 4 to 10% of total inventory cost. Money spent, never recovered, rarely tracked closely enough by first-time owners to even notice the bleed. The third, and the one that ambushed our hypothetical spring cafe, is seasonality. Coffee consumption patterns shift with weather, daylight, and even local school calendars. A cafe near a university can lose a third of its customer base the moment summer break starts. A cafe that leans heavily on iced drinks can watch revenue crater the moment fall hits. None of this shows up in a July snapshot. It only shows up when you've mapped 12 full months, not one good season. The lesson underneath all three: profit and cash flow are not the same thing. A cafe can look profitable in its best month and still run out of actual cash by its worst one, because fixed costs don't fluctuate with the calendar, even when revenue does. So does that mean the cafe dream is simply too fragile to survive? Not quite. Because while the cozy corner cafe model struggles under exactly this kind of pressure, there's a different blueprint, leaner, less romantic, but far more durable, that actually beats these odds. So if the cozy, Pinterest-perfect cafe is this fragile, does anyone actually win at this? Yes, but usually not the businesses you'd expect, and not for the reasons you'd guess. Go back to Dream Emma's model for a second. Prime corner location, high rent, beautiful build-out, single revenue stream, drinks and pastries, sold to whoever happens to walk by. Every dollar of survival depends on foot traffic alone. In a category where margins are already thin, it's a business with one lever, and that lever is largely out of the owner's control. Now compare that to the cafe models that actually post consistent profit. The pattern isn't more charm, it's more math discipline. First, smaller footprints, lower fixed costs. A 600 square foot counter service shop with minimal seating doesn't need the multi-$1,000 seasonal HVAC load or the sprawling lease of a full sit-down cafe. Lower rent means a dramatically lower break-even number, sometimes half of what we calculated earlier. Less charm, more oxygen to breathe. Second, multiple revenue streams. The cafes that thrive rarely rely on walk-in lattes alone. They sell retail coffee bags people can brew at home. They do office catering. A single corporate account can be worth what 50 walk-ins bring in an entire morning. Some wholesale their beans to other small businesses. Every additional stream reduces dependence on unpredictable daily foot traffic. Third, operational leanness. High volume, low frills models. Efficient line design, a tighter menu with fewer SKUs to manage waste on. Staff scheduling built around actual hourly transaction data instead of guesswork consistently outperform the beautiful but bloated cafe down the street. Here's the number that tells the real story. A lean, 700 square foot counter shop with 3 revenue streams might only need 150 drinks a day to break even, less than half of what our earlier example required, while a large, gorgeous 800 square foot cafe with 1 revenue stream needs over 300. Same industry, same coffee, wildly different survival odds, and the difference is entirely structural. The dream doesn't have to die. It just has to get smarter, leaner space, diversified income, and decisions driven by the transaction math, not the mood board. Which brings us to the question every viewer watching this actually came here to answer. Knowing all of this now, would you actually do it? Let's put it all together. You now know a cafe realistically needs $150,000 to $250,000 in startup capital, not the $50. Thou zero fantasy number most people start with. You know that a $4.50 latte, after ingredients, labor, rent, and waste, often nets somewhere between $1 and $1.80 in real contribution margin. You know that translates into needing roughly 250 to 350 drinks a day just to break even. A number that takes most new locations 6 to 18 months to consistently hit. And you know that even a cafe doing everything right can go from profitable in July to underwater by February, purely because fixed costs don't care about the calendar. So before anyone signs a lease, here are 3 questions the math demands you answer honestly. 1. Can you survive 12 months of thin or negative cash flow? Not hope, not it'll probably pick up. Can you actually fund a year where the business might not pay you a dollar? 2. Do you have 6 or more months of operating reserve set aside, separate from your startup capital? Because the startup budget gets you open. It's the reserve fund that gets you through the slow February that always follows the busy July. 3. Have you modeled your break-even number against realistic, conservative foot traffic, not best-case Saturday morning energy stretched across every day of the year? If you can answer yes to all 3, the cafe dream isn't reckless. It's a calculated bet, backed by a spreadsheet instead of a vision board. If you can't, that's not failure. That's the math doing exactly what it's supposed to do, saving you from finding out the hard way. With your savings on the line, the dream isn't dead. It's just only safe with the numbers on your side. So next time you're standing in line, watching someone tap their card for a 450 latte, you'll see something most people never will. Not a symbol of easy profit, but the tip of a much deeper equation. Rent, labor, waste, and hundreds of daily transactions, all balanced on a margin thinner than anyone assumes. If you had to guess your own tree break-even number right now, drop it in the comments. And if you want the next hidden economics breakdown before it drops, you know what to do.